Are you really high risk to the point where you need to alter your natural birth plan? Or are you just getting that label as an excuse for them to push the medical birth on you? This question we're going to be diving deep into today in the Empowered Birth series, where, as you know, I go deep into everything that you need to know to plan and get your empowered, true natural birth. Because the thing about natural birth is that there's two types. There is the natural birth that is perpetuated by the medical system and our birth culture, and true natural birth, which is the physiological process that your body is going to do, whether you have anybody helping you or not. You also need to understand that physiological birth is very difficult to get in our current birth culture and medical system. Many people do not know how to support it properly. There are books available to help you understand that process, and one of them is Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. Now, I do go into a little bit about true natural birth and the empowered birth method of why we aim for a true natural birth, and we pull back only as much as needed. But then, sometimes you're given that high risk label, or something comes up in your pregnancy, and suddenly the medical system is saying to you, well, actually, you can't have a natural birth. We need you to induce, or we need you to have a C-section. We need to do additional monitoring. We need to do these tests. You can't have a home birth. Any kind of restriction on what you wanted in your natural birth can suddenly feel like the rug is being pulled out from under you. Now, I'm going to give you two examples in this. One is the example of actually having complications and still having a true natural birth. And the other one that I'm going to be telling you is when there were no complications, it was really not anything to worry about. And still, I got tricked out of having this natural birth that I wanted. And I had to fight for it in the hospital. And I almost got a C-section. If I hadn't assessed the risks that I'm going to be teaching about in this video, I might have agreed to the induction that they wanted to push on me. I might have agreed to see the OB that would most likely have continued to chip away at my confidence. Instead, I was able to stay firm, and I have been able to pass that on to my clients. Now, if you watched the last video in this series, then you know that I was talking about confidently saying no. And if you've been following along with the videos and the 26 things that you need to know if this is your first time planning a true natural birth, then you've also recognized that a lot of what's being perpetuated in our medical system and our birth culture makes it really difficult to assess whether something is really going to go wrong if you say no, or if it's just could, might, possibly, maybe happen. Now, I do have a framework around this, which is getting past your fear. So part of the empowered birth method is we need to have our birth vision figured out. We need to know what our true natural birth looks like, our ideal birth plan, and then we draw our hard lines in the sand. From that point, we also assess any fears that are going to come up, and we question them. We start challenging them. We create backup plans for the ones that are still true, and we let go of everything else. Because our culture has been very much ingrained to be medical, we don't know what we don't know. A lot of wisdom was lost, and we don't fully trust our bodies. No matter how many natural birth books we get that say our body is designed to birth, you then go into the system and everything goes wrong. And you want to know what's really going on, right? You want to know why this happens. Why is it that babies can be born in cars when mom was on her way to the hospital to get an epidural, and yet a physiological birth where we are planning a free birth even is suddenly seen as a big disaster waiting to happen? Well, again, this is due to perspective. And I talk about this inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth, which you can get on Amazon. You can also check it out inside of the playlist on my YouTube channel. If you are watching this outside of YouTube, make sure you're also on the YouTube channel looking at all of these videos because, again, I go deep. Now, I want to let you know that this is technically the do-it-yourself route to empowered birth. That means I do not expect you to pay me anything. If you want information, it is free to access. Information is free. You only pay for access to me. So through the Empowered Birth Method, there are 3 paths, and one is do it yourself. If you want to know the rest of it, you can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide and learn about those 3 paths. There's an overview of the pros and cons of each of them, telling you how to get the most out of each path. But since you are watching this video, even if you've just started following me or you found this by accident, I'm going to tell you right now, take notes. This is not a passive class. This is not just a video with a positive birth story and a little bit of fluff with me saying buy my course at the end. I am not going to hold anything back from you. In fact, if you continue to go through my master classes, you will get the pieces that you need. You just have to put them together yourself. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments. However, I don't get to them as fast as if you email me. Email me and my team at hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com if you have any questions. We will get back to you within 3 to 5 business days. We don't work on Fridays. And then if you are already a community newsletter subscriber, then all you have to do is hit reply to any of our weekly emails that we send out. And what this will do is we will know that you are a community subscriber, you are asking a question, we will prioritize you. Because our priorities go first to our premium coaching clients who also get access to us on WhatsApp. Then it goes to our Empowered Birth students that are in our premium coaching programs. Then it also goes into self-study where we have the email support as they're going through the course. They do get one coaching call with me, a laser coaching, or with one of my team members to be able to basically take the Empowered Birth method that they've just gone through and then be like, okay, now I just need like 1 or 2 little pieces to support me. I do also sometimes outsource this to other people if my team members might be busy or myself. So we make sure that anybody that we bring in or anybody that we send you to is going to be a credible source that is going to help you, that is not going to just toss you aside or give you surface level information, but is really going to help you have your empowered birth. Because I am committed to you having an empowered birth, whether you work directly with me or not, whether you get any of my courses or not. So again, I'm just going to remind you, take notes as you're watching this video. If you just came upon this by chance and you're like, you know what, this is a really long video and I only have 5 minutes, then bookmark it, save it, and come back to it later when you have the time to focus on it. Because I'm just going to tell you, these deep dive master classes are deep, and you are going to get all of the information that you need when it comes to assessing risk inside of this masterclass. I'm also going to let you know that in addition to your empowered birth, there were book bonuses that you could access through the book or even just by going to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. And one of those extras was a 5-step decision-making framework, which is what this video is going to be based off of. So recognizing that there is also a PDF where you can learn all of the basics of what I'm going to be teaching. If you go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and sign up for the newsletter that way, or what you can do is just email the team hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com and we'll give you that report. There is also a workbook that was added later on after the creation of your Empowered Birth Academy. And this workbook ties in with the report. So if you want both of those resources, again, it's on you to go and get them. I'm going to let you know that one thing that I have found really helpful is that not just getting information, but implementing is the key. If you implement the information and you actually write things down, you are more likely to be able to get your empowered birth than if you don't. My coaching clients at the highest level know that I have high expectations for them. When they come in to work with me, they are taking the information that I give them, but then they are also making it their own, and they are applying it in other areas of their life, and they're coming back every single week, and they're telling me about their successes. They're telling me about their challenges. They're like, I took what you said, and I applied it, and I ran into this snag, and can you tell me more about that? Or I took what you said and I made it better. And here's the piece I added. And here's the new thing. In fact, a lot of the high risk stuff that I'm teaching is based on the second story, which is of Jenny. Now, you might have already heard of Jenny. Jenny was a first time mom. She was in her very, very late 30s. She had gone into the medical system and she'd read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. She also wasn't able to take any classes at the time. However, if she had been able to, if she hadn't been pregnant during the pandemic, she would have taken all of those classes. Jenny is the kind of person who invests in her education. Jenny is the kind of person that invests in herself. And when she went through her pregnancy, she was asking all of the questions of her doctor. She was trying to find ways that she could keep herself healthy. She's like, what are foods that I can eat that can help me manage my chronic high blood pressure? And the doctor's like, well, just eat a balanced diet. And that was the extent of it. Now, later with her second pregnancy, Jenny did all of the research because she had been working with me and she had been planning through the empowered birth method. She knew that she'd need specific types of foods to be able to manage her chronic high blood pressure and later also gestational diabetes to be able to have her unassisted vaginal birth after cesarean in the hospital. She also knew that she needed to have more advocacy skills than she'd had previously. She wasn't aware of the political dynamics that were at play and why, when she had gone to hire a midwife later in her pregnancy at 35 weeks and said, you know what, this is ridiculous. My doctor thinks that I need to know nothing. And he's just ordering these tests and he's not telling me why. And he just keeps calling my pregnancy high risk. And I'm seeing these high risk specialists. And then suddenly induction is just being dropped on me. And I don't know why all of this is being told to me. And I'm not being told my risks and benefits. It's just like, this is just what we do. We're just going to manage you. And you just need to know nothing. Don't worry your little pretty head about it. We'll take care of everything. And you'll have a healthy baby in the end. And a healthy baby is all that matters. Well, that's not what happened with Jenny. Jenny got fed up. She hired a midwife, but the midwife wasn't able to disclose everything to her in her pregnancy. And there was one doula who said, hey, they're probably going to try to push you into an induction. But Jenny didn't think that that was going to happen. She really didn't think that that was going to happen to her. She didn't know that she was actually on her way to ending up having a very traumatic induction turned into a traumatic C-section, which then would lead to preeclampsia. And she was really scared and she was basically wrecked when I found her. When I found her back in the fall of 2020, Jenny had been convinced that natural birth was all a big lie. Jenny had been convinced that nothing was ever going to be positive for her ever again. When Jenny was with me, she was really just trying to find an outlet to complain about her birth and to be angry at what had happened to her. And I gave her that outlet as somebody who understood that anger. I'm like, you know what? You can unleash it on me because I've worked through all of my trauma. I understand where you're coming from. I'm telling you that birth is a positive experience, but if you're not ready for that, it's okay. You can absolutely be upset right now. And I gave her that space to do that. I also helped her in healing her birth trauma. I showed her the resources that she needed to do it, but I didn't push her. I let her come to it in her own time. And later on, she's like, you know what? I want to take your classes before I had any. That's where I came up with your Empowered Birth Workshop. We created that. We helped other moms. And suddenly Jenny's like, you know what? I think I might like to have another baby again. I think I might like to try. And yeah, I've got this really big high risk label on me. I'm going to be 41, chronic high blood pressure, previous C-section, possibly getting gestational diabetes. I don't know yet. And history of preeclampsia. All of the things that would basically have the medical system saying no. And by learning how to assess risk, which was one of our first few classes that I taught in our larger program of what is now your Empowered Birth Academy in the premium coaching space, which I don't always run those classes. So if you do want to know about the premium coaching, there's an intake form. Again, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide to learn more about the premium coaching. But even outside of that, now I have self-study for that. Everything that I've created in the terms of risk and assessing risk and decision-making frameworks and all of it is based on how I was learning in my own pregnancy and helping my friends, and then ultimately helping Jenny, because Jenny was one of my first clients, technically, saying, how do I pay you? And then I just brought her in as a partner instead. So understanding this journey where you know how this ends, this high-risk mom who had everything against her ended up having a completely unassisted vaginal birth after cesarean in the hospital with a doctor, not a midwife. She had a doctor. So she had a doctor. She was in a health authority that really doesn't support true natural birth, that they would, if they had their way, they would have induced Jenny. But Jenny was able to assess her risk. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. So another resource you're going to want outside of the empowered birth method is Rachel Reed's book, Why Induction Matters. And the reason you're going to want that specific book is because Rachel Reed has a different way of assessing risk. She also goes into the nitty-gritty of research and why just going through evidence-based research is kind of difficult, because you're not always going to get unbiased information. In fact, there's a lot of things about physiological birth that just aren't being studied. And Rachel Reed also understands physiological birth. In fact, she understands it so well that this is the guidebook that I basically tell all of my clients to read. Rachel Reed's blog, Midwife Thinking, is a really excellent resource site. And Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage also helps you understand the overview of physiological birth. But Why Induction Matters, there is a chapter on assessing risk. And that is where my 5-step decision-making framework actually comes from. Now, again, if you want to know more about that, you can always go and get the extras from my book, Your Empowered Birth. Just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras, or you can just reach out, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, and we'll email it to you. But the fact is that when you're assessing risk, you really need to look at it as like, is this something immediate that's going to happen? Or is this a could, might, possibly, maybe happen? And this is how I was able to avoid having an induction and possibly a C-section. And I was able to have my natural birth, even when everybody was saying that baby is too small, he's not going to tolerate labor well, you need to induce because he needs to be on the outside because he's not growing properly, you can't have a home birth, you can't even have a natural birth, you're probably not going to be able to tolerate the pain, blah, 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 all of that fear. And I was sitting there and I'm like, if this was really serious, they wouldn't be telling me all of this to try to convince me. It would be an actual emergency. And that leads to number 1 in the risk assessment, which is this a true complication? Because there's 3 different types of ways of assessing risk, and I'm going to go through all 3. And number 1 is complications. So this is what I talked about with Jenny, and this is what I talked about with all of the other empowered moms that I've worked with. I talk about this inside Your Empowered Birth Academy, and I talk about this inside the decision-making framework. Again, if you want that, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, or just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, and that will give you the overview of where to get our programs, where to get our workshop, because it is inside Your Empowered Birth workshop as well. I included that resource. And if you really want to just get the extras for the book and sign up for the newsletter, you can do it that way as well. So understanding complications. Complications are when something is imminent. There is a major danger here. And I know I just rhymed, but something like developing preeclampsia, that is a complication. Developing HELP syndrome or cholestasis, that is a complication. If you are in labor and suddenly there is a major issue with you or your baby, maybe you even chose to get the epidural and suddenly things are spiking up, your blood pressure is spiking up, and you are losing consciousness. There is a complication. But you know what's not a complication? Going past your due date. Having high blood pressure without any other symptoms is not a complication. It's something else. So when you're assessing complication, we go through that whole idea of brain, but I flip it on its head and I call it NABRI. Do we need to do something now? If we need to do something now, then it is not a pink flag, it is a red flag. Cross the line of your hard lines in the sand. Go and watch some of my other videos about decision making and hard lines in the sand and birth plans and backup birth plans to know more about that. But you've got a hard line in the sand. Now, Jenny had hard lines in the sand too. She knew that if she developed preeclampsia or was creeping over that, she was going to induce. She was going to possibly even plan a gentle C-section to reclaim her power. She had those backup plans. So it wasn't, I'm going to have natural birth or bust. It was, where are my hard lines in the sand? Where are the flags that are going to come up where I'm going to be like, okay, now we're in a complication. Now we need to do something. But before you get into a complication, you can also assess from the idea of preventing that from happening. The more you're able to mitigate that risk of that complication, the more control you have. And this leads into the other one, which is a deviation. Number 2. Now, a deviation is basically the pink flags that could turn into a real complication, such as having high blood pressure. But it's like, okay, this is something that could turn into something more. The blood pressure is rising and it could turn into preeclampsia. And Jenny actually had this experience where at a certain point in her pregnancy near the end, she did notice that her blood pressure was going up. And she was concerned about that. She was also concerned about the medical system pushing her into an induction. So I'm like, okay, Jenny, so what do you really want the outcome to be? Make sure you watch one of my other videos about confidently saying no and advocating for yourself if you want to really understand these skills. So she's like, okay, all I want to know is where I'm at. Is this blood pressure spike leading me into the direction of preeclampsia, or is it just because I'm at the end of my pregnancy and this is naturally what happens? It turns out it was just she was at the end of her pregnancy and this is what naturally happens. But being able to assess that was empowering for her, because instead of freaking out when she was approaching that, she's like, no. The other one is gestational diabetes. That's a deviation. Because again, it can lead to a complication. I'm not saying that these things do not possibly lead to complications. What I am saying is that there are a lot of moms who have had gestational diabetes and even type 1 diabetes where they have had completely natural births at home even. So having gestational diabetes or type 1 diabetes does not necessarily mean you can't have a natural birth. It just means that you're going to want to take more precautions to make sure that as you're going through your natural birth plan, you are watching out for those red flags that might come up to say that you're going to have a complication so that you can mitigate it. So you can change something in your diet, alter the way you're doing something, put another plan in place, alter your birth plan if you choose to do that. But aiming for a true natural birth, you can still do that even if you have a deviation. Another very common deviation that we have is if you have twins or you have a breech baby. Again, this is something that happens out in the wild. Moms don't always know that they're carrying twins. Some home birth moms who never had an ultrasound suddenly realize that instead of expecting the one baby they thought they were expecting, they end up getting a surprise extra baby. And other times there are moms that didn't know that their baby was breech. And surprise, there is a breech home birth, sometimes even unassisted, unplanned, but still manageable. So recognizing that just because you have a deviation does not necessarily mean it's going to turn into a complication. It's concerning because there's a little bit of fear that comes up. What if this bad thing happens? But the bad thing has not happened yet. It's a could, might, possibly, maybe happen. And if you're assessing through, do we need to do anything now? No, we don't need to change our plan. However, we might want to work with this a little, create our backup plans, maybe also find ways to shift the situation. I mean, you can do exercises to help turn a breech baby, but at the same time, if you wanted to have a breech baby, you've got that in your pocket. It's like, even if the baby doesn't flip, I'm still going to attempt a natural birth. Even if I do have twins, I'm still going to attempt a natural birth. Even if I have gestational diabetes, I'll alter my diet a little bit. I'll monitor myself and I'm going for my natural birth. I'm not automatically going to induce. When you recognize that, that gives you your power back. And again, if you go through the decision-making framework workbook, and tie that into this, again, all you have to do is email me if you want a copy of that. It is inside your Empowered Birth Academy as well. And I've also put it inside your Empowered Birth Workshop. So recognizing that you have this tool, you can then be like, okay, I don't have to worry. And the last one on our list, number 3, is a variation. Now, this one is where a lot of people still get stuck. I'm talking about things like going past your due date. I'm talking about things like being over 35. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have a deviation that's going to come up. You might not get gestational diabetes at all. You might not have any complications at all. You might not have any other little medical concerns just because you're 35. You could be the most healthy 35 or even 40-year-old woman that's like, I'm healthier now than I was when I was in my 20s. This is where I'm at now. At 39 years old, as of recording this video, I feel healthier than I ever did in my 20s. When I was giving birth to my son, I did not have as much knowledge and education on my health, and I wasn't taking care of myself as well as I am now. So even though I'm technically advanced maternal age, the fact is that I'm like, bring it on. I know that I would be able to handle a pregnancy at this point, and I would not be worrying about advanced maternal age. I also would not be worrying about going past my due date. Go watch some of my other videos, by the way, on the due dates, because I did a deep dive on this with Dr. Sarah Wickham's book, In Your Own Time. And again, if you want more information, Why Induction Matters is an excellent resource to show you the difference, because Rachel Reed actually divides her book between true complications where induction is offered and variations when induction is offered. A deviation is something that I added to that puzzle piece because Rachel Reed was talking about complications and variations, but I'm like, but there's something in the middle that's not being addressed, and that's a deviation. So by understanding this and recognizing there might not be anything wrong at all, but because of our medical system, because of the fear, because of the fact that true natural birth is very rarely supported, because we are a very risk-averse society, and because the medical system treats every single complication the same, treats every variation the same, it's all one size fits all. In order for you to have a true natural birth, you really need to be able to let go of that fear of being labeled high risk, because technically anybody could be labeled high risk. I was labeled high risk just because I happened to be over 25. I was labeled high risk because I was tiny. I was labeled high risk because my baby was technically tiny, but that baby was almost 8 pounds when he was born. So it was more like my baby had his own growth curve. So by recognizing these differences, and again, Rachel Reed's book, Why Induction Matters, is excellent for this, for assessing the risks factors, especially when it comes to induction. You're able to be like, okay, I don't have to make a decision right this second. I can go and think about it. I can really take the time to look at my backup plans and see what hard lines in the sand I've crossed or I'm about to cross so that I can go into my backup plan. Because until you need to cross those lines, you can still have a true natural birth. And again, if you want to know more about that, there's a whole process where all you need to do is have your aim of your birth vision. We do have a workbook for that. And then you also have your decision-making framework, which goes and helps you create your backup plans, as well as advocate for yourself in the medical system and what your plan is if they push back, so that when you go in, you're feeling really confident. And these workbooks are something that I've really put together based on what I've done with my clients and how I've helped them, how I helped Jenny. I mean, a lot of things that she did, it was just phenomenal how she was able to stand in her power. It was unheard of in our medical system. And a lot of my clients have made medical history by standing up for their rights and being like, actually, we can have a natural birth. It doesn't have to be this way. You're operating in fear, and I get that. And now here they've had a client that did nothing bad happened. So now they're more open to change. When you have an empowered birth, what this does is it creates a ripple effect where now you have a powerful birth story that you can now use to counterbalance anything that somebody else says about what's allowed. And not only that, but when other moms share their empowered birth stories, that also creates the ripple effect. So if you are doing the empowered birth method and you're doing the do-it-yourself route, and you do have success with this, even in the smaller scale, please leave your comments and share your story, because that enhances the ability for other moms to be like, oh, there is another way. I can do this. And there's so many empowered birth success stories. I'm constantly collecting them. I do interviews for the Empowered Mom Hour. So if you do want to get on as a guest, you just reach out, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. We'll assess where you're at. We'll assess whether you're really comfortable talking on camera. If you're not, we might just share it inside of our newsletter as an empowered mom success story. So you don't even have to get on camera if you're camera shy. And at the same time, if you are an influencer in other areas, like my friend Claire Sherman, who came on with Shine Space Parenting and shared her empowered story of having a home birth after previous cesarean with type 1 diabetes. I mean, she is using that same story, and she also amplifies her message at the same time. So what we do at Empowering Moms is really, I'm here to amplify your voice. I'm here to empower you to have your empowered birth and to do it your way, and to make sure that you are not falling into what I call the fear traps, which, being labeled high risk, is one of those major fear traps that gets a lot of moms stuck into going for that induction, or agreeing to medical intervention they don't really want, or agreeing to that test that then puts them on this cascade of more intervention. Because if that test comes back a certain way, suddenly that leads to a direction they didn't want to go. So being able to confidently say no and assess those risks protects you from falling into that fear trap. So again, I'm just going to do that quick recap. You first need to assess, is this a complication? No. Is this a deviation? No. Is this a variation? And by assessing those three things, you're going to be able to figure out whether you even need to be afraid in the first place, whether you need to change your plan at all. And even if you do feel like you need to change your plan, it's your plan, it's not their plan. So aim for true natural birth, pull back only as needed, create your ideal birth vision, have your backup plans, assess when you're going to cross those lines in the sand, and confidently advocate for yourself with the Empowered Birth Method. And again, if you want to know more, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy empowered birth journey. If you found value in this video, like, share, subscribe to this channel, and stay tuned because next week I'm going to be talking about finding your alternatives to what is being suggested in the medical system if you decide that you do need to alter your plan from true natural birth to bringing in a little bit of extra help and support. So get ready for that because I'm really excited to teach this to you. This is one of my passions. This is one of the core components of what I taught my clients way back in 2021 when I ran the first series of Empowered Birth workshops and the Empowered Birth program, where I had my coaching clients. I got those success stories with Lisa and Rebecca and Jenny, teaching them what they needed to know. And all of the things that I've done with them at the high level is what I now pass on to my clients. I pass it on to my students, and everything that I put out there, information is free. You only pay for access to me. So if you have any questions, please reach out. hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. It will spark something in me, and I will know what to talk about next. I will know what to create a resource on, because I have over 11 years of experience just on birth in itself, plus the psychology, plus everything else that I've gathered over the years. I bring everything to the Empowered Birth Method, even outside of typical birth education, to ensure that you have an empowered birth no matter what. No matter what happens, your birth is empowered because you are the decision maker. You are your own best expert, and you are trusting your own intuition. And that is something that is so powerful, because when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life, and no one can take your power from you ever again. So thank you so much for watching. Happy empowered birth journey, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.